Hello, everyone. All right, looks like everybody can hear me. That's good. I decided what we would do today is talk a little bit about the ethics of belief by looking at William James's famous. Well, it was delivered as a lecture. So although you can find it as a chapter in a book now, it was originally delivered as a lecture at Harvard University. James's paper is called "The Will to Believe," and he asks when is it all right? Is it all right, if ever, to believe something without evidence? And if so, when and under what circumstances? And I thought that would be kind of an interesting way to start bringing the course to a conclusion, because we have today's class and we have Thursday's class, so we're nearly done. So James is responding to a couple of things. He's responding to something called Pascal's wager. He's responding to a thought experiment by a guy named Clifford, who has the famous thought experiment about the merchant who sends his old damaged ship across the sea. So we'll be talking about all of that. Let me just share my screen here. And we'll do this like we did last time. So that means kind of like a seminar style. I will have the readings open here, and we'll take a look at important parts and sort of discuss the material together. So let's see. And we won't read this line by line, of course. But there are some parts that I want to draw your attention to. Firstly, who was William James? Has anyone heard the name before? Okay, so Jack's heard of him. Conrad and Alicia, not familiar. That's okay, though. That's what I'm here for. William James was a 19th century, kind of early 20th century philosopher and psychologist. He was the founder, or co-founder rather, of an American philosophical movement called pragmatism, which is kind of where this paper comes in. Actually, pragmatism is all about, how to practically live one's life. And here, this is pragmatism with respect to religious faith. So say you want to be a Christian. Now, somebody like Nietzsche is going to say, that's impossible now. What are you doing trying to be Christian? We've got science and everything, and we know that, we know that life forms weren't created the way they are now in their current form. We know that the Earth is not at the center of the cosmos. Can't be a Christian anymore. It's crazy. But James is coming along and saying something very, very different from Nietzsche. He comes along and he says, well, you know what? If it's a really important if it's a really important matter, a moral or an ethical or a religious matter that needs to be decided, and you don't have any evidence either way, it's okay for you to pick an option. And in this paper, he's discussing when, like, under what kinds of circumstances is that all right. Now, I also think that this does and doesn't apply to the paranormal, right? It might and it might not. And I'm kind of hoping that's what we can get into today when we talk about William James. So, and I should say, like, if it seems like I'm disagreeing with James, at any point throughout this lecture, sure, there's actually quite a lot that I disagree. I disagree with James on, but James also seems like he was a pretty solid dude. He was a family man, liked teaching. I think he was at Harvard for pretty much his whole career. Somebody who I always say about William James, he's somebody who I disagree with a lot, but out of all the philosophers that I talk about in my courses, I think that I would actually enjoy talking to William James, sitting down, having a beer with him, having a philosophical discussion. I think I would actually enjoy doing that with William James the most, because he actually sounds like a nice guy. And a lot of philosophers weren't actually nice guys, right? So with that said, let's start. We can just begin with the second paragraph here. Let me get myself out of the way. So James says here, and by the way, these numbers on the side, these are page numbers from the original draft, or the original, copy of this book. These are chapter numbers here. So the Roman numerals in the center of the text, chapters, the numbers in these curly brackets over here on the left-hand side are page numbers. So on page 2, we read, "I've long defended to my own students the lawfulness of voluntarily adopted faith. But as soon as they have got well imbued with the logical spirit, they have, as a rule, refused to admit my contention to be lawful philosophically, even though, in point of fact, they were personally all the time chock full of some faith or other themselves." So he's like, I've got these students who, once they start learning about philosophy, think that everything's got to be grounded in evidence and there's no room for faith. And you may have that impression after having taken this class, right? James says, "I am all the while, however, so profoundly convinced that my own position is correct that your invitation has seemed to me a good occasion to make my statements more clear." Remember, James is being invited. This is an invited talk. So that's why he's saying that. "Perhaps your minds will be more open than those which I have hitherto had to deal. I will be as little technical as I can, though I must begin by setting up some technical distinctions that will help us in the end." So I think that some of you can probably relate to either James or his students. James is saying, sure. These students might believe in stuff. Maybe they're Christians. More specifically, they're probably Protestant Christians. So there's stuff they believe. But as soon as they start learning philosophy, they get all logical and say that everything has to be grounded in reason. And it's worse still when they still believe. And James wants to say that, you know what? It's okay to believe without evidence in certain important cases. You don't need to have evidence for everything, James is saying. Do I agree with him there? I'm honestly not sure. It really depends. I don't know. I think it depends what we're talking about. But what are we talking about? James is about to tell us. First, what do you think? I mean, is that a balance that any of you have to strike yourselves between reason and faith? Because I have to tell you that and I know this isn't the first time I've said this. This is something that's kind of foreign to me, right? If I'm being honest, not raised religious. So this is a sort of thing that I've never really had to deal with, I suppose. Or when I did, I guess it was, well, with this stuff, with paranormal stuff. And I decided to be more of a skeptic. but that's not quite the same as religiosity, I guess. But I guess that's the closest I get. So Conrad says the difference is how we use those beliefs. If you use them to justify certain behaviors, especially ones that impact others, you need to reconsider. However, if it is merely an isolated belief, there's no problem. I think that James would probably agree with you there. Yeah. I guess I was a lot like that too. And now I mean, I still try to keep it. I say it like this. I still try to keep an open mind, but not so open that my brains fall out. So, yes, I want to be open to possibilities too, but I believe we have to exercise skepticism. And that's not just for the sake of doubting. That's so that we know what's true. Okay. So Johnny was asking for Conrad to clarify what he means by impact. And yeah, I would agree that this is an important thing to consider. Remember that it used to be that most, if not all, laws were grounded in religion. So things have got more and more secular over the years. I mean, not all laws. I mean, I know that there are civic, like the Roman civic law. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more like feudalism and stuff. But yeah, that's an important one. I think we see the risk of this now in the United States, right? And we have for a while. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting, Isaac. Yeah, so you do it, but do you feel kind of like you're going through the motions a bit, or are you walking two different worlds, perhaps? Like you go to mass on Sunday, but then you have a philosophy class through the week, right? It's kind of like you have to walk between worlds almost, or at least I could be wrong, because again, I don't know. I've never had to go to mass. Yeah, well, sort of. Okay. Yeah, how you treat non-believers, that's true. Are you nice to them, or are you going to be not nice to them, right? That's important. Well, James wants to apply this kind of that's a good question. Yeah. I guess that'll be up to Isaac to answer. But James wants to apply this sort of thinking. Okay. So you do feel like an authentic, yeah, okay. So it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Maybe it's kind of like what you were saying, Alicia. You have a rational side and you have an open-minded, curious side. And the same might be the case with Isaac here. That could be what's going on, right? No, I'm not. I'm just saying maybe that's the case. I'm not sure. Now, James wants to apply all of this to religion, but I'm kind of wondering whether some of what he is about to say could be applied to paranormal claims. And I'd like to discuss all of that with you. So here's where James lays out when it's okay to believe without evidence. So he says on page 3, let us give the name. Oh, excuse me. Oh. Let us give the name hypothesis to anything that may be proposed to our belief. And just as the electricians speak of live and dead wires, let us speak of any hypothesis as either live or dead. A live hypothesis is one which appeals as a real possibility to him whom it is proposed. If I ask you to believe in the Mahdi, the notion makes no electric connection with your nature. It refuses to scintillate with any credibility at all. As an hypothesis, it is completely dead. To an Arab, however, even if he be not one of the Mahdi's followers, the hypothesis is among the mind's possibilities. It is alive. So just a note on the language here. It's a little old, right? It's a little archaic. If I'm not mistaken, the Mahdi he is referring to is the Imam Mahdi, who in Islam is a figure that appears at the end times, if I'm not mistaken. I think he comes and he helps fight the Dajjal, which is like the Antichrist. Now, what James is saying here, he's talking to Protestant Christians. So he's saying, if I say to you, believe in the Mahdi, they're going to be like, nah, because it's not really a plausible option for them. But for a Muslim, it's a live option. That's what James is trying to show here. Even though the vernacular he uses is a little old-timey and imprecise, This shows that deadness and liveness in an hypothesis are not intrinsic properties, but relations to the individual thinker. They are measured by this willingness to act. The maximum of liveness in an hypothesis means willingness to act irrevocably. Practically, that means belief. But there is some believing tendency wherever there is willingness to act at all. Next, he says, let us call the decision between two hypotheses an option. Options may be of several kinds. They may be living or dead, forced or avoidable, or momentous or trivial. And for our purposes, we may call an option genuine option when it is the forced, living, and momentous kind. And this is the important part for James. So we have so all of these all of these options here, we're trying to work out whether we have, in the case of, for James, it's belief in God, whether belief in God is a genuine option. That is whether the hypothesis believe in God or God exists. He's calling it a hypothesis because, again, this is something you do on faith. Hypothesis is a scientific term, but it still means the same thing here. It means something like an educated guess, because the idea is in Christianity, you're not supposed to go out and gather evidence for God's existence. You're supposed to believe on faith. Never mind that many Christian philosophers did exactly that. They tried to make arguments for the existence of God. But James is saying, forget it. You have no evidence and you have to decide on faith alone. It's okay to do that if you have what we call a genuine option. And genuine options are live, forced, and momentous. So let's talk about what that means. James says a living option is one in which both hypotheses are live ones. If I say to you, be a theosophist or a Mohammedan, it is probably a dead option because for you neither hypothesis is likely to be alive. But if I say be an agnostic or be a Christian, it is otherwise. Trained as you are, each hypothesis makes some appeal, however small, to your belief. Again, you can tell that the audience that James is writing for here is, shall we say, much more homogenous than a classroom like this is. I'm sure that I have students in my class where be an agnostic or be a Christian is not, well, both of those at least might not be live options. A theosophist, I'm not really sure what that is supposed to refer to. Mohammedan is an old, archaic term for Muslim. We stopped using this word because it's not accurate. After all, it is accurate to say that Christians worship Christ. That is true. They do. Muslims don't worship Muhammad, right? They worship Allah. Muhammad is Allah's prophet, and he's really important, but he's not actually the guy they worship. So we changed that. But imagine that. Imagine if you were a Christian and I said, be an atheist or be a Muslim. You'd be like, nah, not really. Those aren't really options. I'm already a Christian. Not really options for me, right? Those would be both dead options to you. You've already made a decision. Not going to believe in it. So you need your hypothesis. You need your hypothesis to be live. Now James says here, next, if I say to you, choose between going out with your umbrella or without it, I do not offer you a genuine option, for it is not forced. You can easily avoid it by not going out at all. Similarly, if I say either love me or hate me, or either call my theory true or call it false, your option is avoidable. You may remain indifferent to me, neither loving nor hating, and you may decline to offer any judgment as to my theory. But if I say either accept this truth or go without it, I put on you a forced option, for there is no standing place outside of the alternative. Every dilemma based on a complete logical disjunction with no possibility of not choosing is an option of this forced kind. Theology. Yes, that's theology. This is theosophy, which I'm not sure. No, it's okay, Alicia. The reason I'm not sure what that means is because I actually don't know if this is supposed to mean something like theology or theological philosophy, like Isaac just wrote here. I'm not really sure. It doesn't matter though. The point is, just for illustrative purposes, what to show us what a living option is. A living option is it's like you have a choice between A or B. It's basically, these are like decision problems. If you're in computer science, you know about decision problems. So you have option A and option B, and they both have to be live. So for James, it's going to be believe in God or don't. Right? He could do either one of those things. He's like, well, I'm a Christian. I could keep believing in God, of course. Or I could stop. Because I'm also a philosopher and I'm very logical and stuff and whatever. I don't know. So, right. And you also need your option to be forced, which means you have to make a choice. That's what James is saying. A forced option would be like, in those old action movies, there was this trope where somebody would get a phone call, and it was a phone call that was like important to the plot point. Our main character would be handed the phone, like, the call is from Destiny. Do you accept the charges? Like something like that, right? You can either take the phone or not. You can either do what you're being called to do or not. That's a forced option. What other kinds of forced options can we think of? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Geez, you can only save one or the other, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, you have to choose one. Yeah. Ooh, that got dark. Yeah. But yeah, that would be a forced option. Absolutely. Because you have to make a decision. Um well, still, the yeah, you're right. But you have to make a decision. So that's what a forced option is. Like if I'm at the coffee shop and the person says, "Would you like coffee or tea?" That's not a forced option because I can say, "I'll just have water," right? But yeah, you're right. If there's a gunman who's going to kill one of your parents, you definitely have to pick one. Maybe he'll kill them both if you don't choose. All right. How about momentous stuff? When do we have a momentous option? If I were Dr. Nansen and proposed to you to join my North Pole expedition, Dr. Nansen is a fella who went to the North Pole. Your option would be momentous, for this would probably be your only similar opportunity, and your choice now would either exclude you from the North Pole sort of immortality altogether, or put at least the chance of it into your hands. He who refuses to embrace a unique opportunity loses the prize as surely as if he had tried and failed. Per contra, the option is trivial when the opportunity is not unique, when the stake is insignificant, or when the decision is reversible if it later prove unwise. Such trivial options abound in the scientific life. A chemist finds a hypothesis live enough to spend a year in its verification. He believes in it to that extent, but if his experiments prove inconclusive either way, he is quit for his loss of time, no vital harm being done. It will facilitate our discussion if we keep all these distinctions in mind. So what James is going to argue is that it's okay if you have an option that is a hypothesis that is live, forced, the choice is forced, and it's a momentous option, it's okay to believe without evidence. Momentous, like, yeah, going to the North Pole. Mine would be going to space, right? Or what's something you've always wanted to do? Hey, maybe for we're picking non-faith based examples because I'm not thinking that way, but it just struck me that for certain religious people, well, like imagine if you're Muslim, going on the Hajj might be a momentous option, right? Like maybe everything comes together in your life, and the Hajj, by the way, is a pilgrimage to Mecca, and every adult is supposed to do it if they have the means, the time and the means. So let's say your life comes together, all of a sudden you've got the means and the time. Well, you gotta go. Otherwise, what else are you gonna do? Stay at home and twiddle your thumbs? Come on, you gotta go, right? So that's I guess more of a faithy sort of example. But for me, it would be like going to space or something. Do you want to take a ride in the rocket ship? Yes, probably. Because when will I ever get a chance like that again? Right? I guess that's probably good enough. Does everybody understand so far? Everyone's all clear on what James is saying here? Awesome. Oh, doing a degree. Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting for a momentous option. Yeah, I guess I can kind of relate to that. Because oh, of course, Carol. Yeah. I'll explain the North Pole thing again, and then I will come back to Isaac's point. So what James is saying is that there are momentous options and there are trivial options. Trivial options don't matter. So like, they're just everyday mundane choices that we can make. But somebody offering you to go on a trip to the North Pole, like to go on the North Pole expedition, in the 19th century would have been a momentous option, because you're not going to get that chance again. So what James would say is that, well, you've got to go, because if you don't go to the North Pole now when you have the chance, you'll never get to go to the North Pole, right? It's like if Jeff Bezos said to me, do you want to go on the rocket ship? And I was like, I'm not really a fan of billionaires and companies and stuff, but I might never get to go to space again. So I should probably take that rocket, you know? Well, that would lead to a momentous occasion, but it's not an option. The actual option is not momentous. Although this reminds me, it's only not momentous because it to you, because you don't know. I'll give you an example. So my mother-in-law lives up in North Bay, was going to go to I think it was a drag brunch. Do you know where you go to brunch and the drag queens are there and they do their drag queen stuff, throwing shade and making brunch fun. So my mother-in-law was going to go, but then she didn't. Now, North Bay, small town where a lot of films get made. And who happened to be at this drag brunch? None other than Bryan Cranston. I'm not kidding. Bryan Cranston was at the drag brunch. My mother-in-law would have met him probably had she gone. But nobody knew that Bryan Cranston was going to show up at the drag brunch. So it turned out that was a momentous choice, but she didn't know that, right? Choosing to study again, I think, yeah. Oh, sorry, I think my allergies are acting up. I keep sniffing a lot. So if you're going back to study, I mean, I remember for me, this was a momentous option, a momentous decision. Because I was on a path that I didn't want to be on. I was studying business in college. Ugh. And I wasn't happy. And I thought that, well, I can either keep doing this, or I can stop and do something else, but I have to make a decision before it's too late. So I did, and I decided to study philosophy, and here we are. So yeah, Ben, or not Ben, Ben is, Isaac, to Isaac's point, I agree that could be a momentous option. I know that I was talking about that in terms of action. Well, so does James, right? But when it comes to matters of faith, this translates to belief. That's what he's saying. Now, James is responding to some other ideas, like Pascal's wager. In Pascal's thoughts, Blaise Pascal was a mathematician, by the way. In Pascal's thoughts, there is a celebrated passage known in literature as Pascal's wager. In it, he tries to force us into Christianity by reasoning as if our concern with truth resembled our concern with the stakes in a game of chance. Translated freely, his words are these: you must either believe or not believe that God is. Which will you do? Your human reason cannot say. A game is going on between you and the nature of things, which at the day of judgment will bring out either heads or tails. Weigh what your gains and your losses would be if you should stake all you have on heads or God's existence. If you win in such case, you gain eternal beatitude. If you lose nothing at all. If there were an infinity of chances and only one God in this wager, still you ought to stake your all on God. For then you surely risk a finite loss by this procedure, and any finite loss is reasonable. Even a certain one is reasonable, if there is but the possibility of infinite gain. So I'm sure that some of you are familiar with Pascal's wager. It's something we hear a lot, but we hear about it a lot, but who is not familiar with this idea? Yeah, Conrad knows about it. So Christine is not familiar. That's okay. I'm going to explain it in my own way. The idea is that, let's say, you can believe in God, a particular God, say, like you could be a Christian, or you could be an atheist. So what happens? What are our options? If you believe in God and there is no God, no big deal, right? You've gained a little bit of it. I guess Pascal would say you've gained some benefits that being religious during your lifetime brings you. But if you're a Christian and there's no God, then you just die and whatever, you're just dead, no big deal. But now let's say God exists. If you're a Christian, then you go to heaven and you get infinite reward. If you're not, you go to hell. So it's better to believe, because the benefits are greater if you're right than the losses are if you're wrong. But if you disbelieve, the losses are greater and the benefits are much, much smaller. That's what Pascal says. The thing about this, of course, is that there are other religions, right? The choice is not just between Christianity and atheism, right? There's all the other ones too. So I don't know how well Pascal's wager really works. Yeah, walk in the line. Pascal would say, Isaac, you have to choose. He'd try to force you. He'd try to force the choice on you, right? Well, actually, James would also say this is a forced choice, right? What do you mean? Like restrictions, like in terms of what you're allowed to do? Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Can you expand on that a little bit? I'm just, yeah, not really. I guess like they prevent you from maybe harming yourself and others, is what you mean? Yeah. Yeah, like thou shalt not kill might help people not kill each other, right? And that would be a good thing. That's true. They do have, a lot of religions still do not view that with very, very well. So yeah, Buddhism is a bit of an exception. You're right. It's not really that, it's not like a lot of other religions. I mean, so we can kind of just not worry about that. But yeah, some religious prohibitions make sense, some don't. So like, yeah, maybe some of those prohibitions confer benefits on people, but if they do, it's not, if they do and God isn't real and religion still confer those benefits, then that's not because of the religion itself. It's just a good rule, right? Like the golden rule from Christianity. Every do unto others as you would be done by. There's a formulation of that in like every other religion on the planet. So Yeah, so next paragraph. You probably feel, well, I'll come back to that, Alicia, because that's actually kind of complicated. You probably feel when religious faith expresses itself thus in the language of the gaming table, it is put to its last trumps. Surely Pascal's own personal belief in masses and holy water had far other springs, and this celebrated page of his is but an argument for others, a last desperate snatch at a weapon against the hardness of the unbelieving heart. We feel that a faith in masses and holy water adopted willfully after such a mechanical calculation would lack the inner soul of faith's reality. And if we were ourselves in place of the deity, we should probably take a particular pleasure in cutting off believers of this pattern from the infinite reward. So James seems to be saying to me, you know, you shouldn't believe just because you're playing some wager hoping to win the best prize. And James also says, if I were God, I would take pleasure in not letting those sorts of people into heaven, which is funny. Food restrictions. Okay, I'm going to come back to that. That is an interesting one. I have to admit that I don't know a lot about dietary prohibitions in a lot of religions. The main one that I know about would be the pork taboo. So in Judaism and in Islam, there's a pork taboo. You don't eat pork, right? Pork is not kosher because it's got to do with it's even-toed, but it does not chew its cud. So you can eat a cow, you can eat a goat, can't eat a pig. Wait, in Christianity, there's a pork taboo? I don't think so. Not in most forms. Yeah, no, not in Christianity. Christians eat pork all the time. Yeah, it's probably yeah, that's true. Yeah, you yeah. Ooh. Yeah, there's respectful stuff, but what Conrad says here, there's some reason not to eat this. The reason why, at least if we're going, look for, so it depends. If you go to the Old Testament, it just says in Leviticus, like, don't eat even-toed animals that don't chew their cud. Just don't. So they don't. That's as simple as that in Judaism. In Islam, okay, the milk and meat thing. Okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I'm speaking more specifically just about the pork taboo, but yeah, I always was curious about why dairy and meat are supposed to be kept separate. Okay, so yeah, pork taboo. In the Quran, it's just unclean. It's like, don't eat that. It's gross. Now, why? This is me as a philosopher scientist now. I'm not going to give you the religious answer. I'm going to give you a plausible non-religious answer. And that is because pigs do not do well in hot, dry climates. Right? If you're living in ancient Judea and you've got to raise some animals, you're probably not going to want to go with pigs. Pigs are like us. They're a lot like us. They don't have a very good layer of fur, so they get sunburned. Pigs eat the same things that we eat, so we're actually in competition with our own food. Pigs will make a mess of watering holes. So if you're in a hot, dry climate, pigs are just not an ideal food source. You're going to go with chickens and goats and sheep and stuff. If you go up to Europe, or if you go over to Asia, where there's lots of forests, pigs love it because they can go around, eat the things out of the ground, and they're not eating our food. And it's fine. That's why pork is enjoyed so much in Asia and in Europe, and of course in North America. But I think it might explain a little bit about the pork taboo. So that could be one reason. Also, it's possible that chickens just outcompeted pigs in certain areas. Pigs are good at cleaning up stuff that we don't want to eat, but so are chickens, and chickens grow faster too. So yeah, no one's really sure, but I suspect that it's because it's because of how difficult it is to raise pork in an environment where pork doesn't want to be, right? Because think about it, you're going to have really sick, sunburnt pigs everywhere. They're not going to be appetizing, right? Okay, where were we? It is evident that unless there be some pre-existing tendency, to believe in masses and holy water, the option offered to the will by Pascal is not a living option. So yeah, like he says here, as well might the Mahdi write to us, saying, I am the expected one whom God has created in his effulgence. You shall be infinitely happy if you confess me, otherwise you shall be cut off from the light of the sun. Weigh then your infinite gain if I am a genuine against your finite sacrifice if I am not. His logic would be that of Pascal. He would vainly use it on us, for the hypothesis he offers is us is dead. No tendency to act on it exists in us to any degree. And yeah, of course, that's the problem with Pascal's wager. Either believe in God or don't for these reasons. But which God? The Christian conception of the Abrahamic God. But if you went up to, say, a Hindu and said, okay, you can either believe in the God of the Bible or not, he's going to say, what are you talking about? Nah. It's not a living hypothesis, right? And lastly, Clifford. That's where I really want to get to. James is responding to Clifford. That delicious enfant terrible, Clifford writes, the terrible child, Clifford writes, belief is desecrated when given to unproved and unquestioned statements for the solace and private pleasure of the believer. Whoso would deserve well of his fellows in this matter will guard the purity of his belief with a very fanaticism of jealous care, lest at any time it should rest on an unworthy object and catch a stain which can never be wiped away. If a belief has been accepted on insufficient evidence, even though the belief be true, as Clifford on the Safe page explains, the pleasure is a stolen one. It is sinful because it is stolen in defiance of our duty to mankind. That duty is to guard ourselves from such beliefs as from a pestilence, which may shortly master our own body and then spread to the rest of the town. It is wrong always, everywhere, and for everyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. Clifford offers a thought experiment to try and illustrate what he's talking about. He says, imagine that there's this owner of a ship, like a sailing ship, and it's old and in disrepair. He probably shouldn't be sailing that ship anymore, but he does. He sends it on its way with a full crew and lots of cargo. Now the ship reaches its destination, but it might not have, because the ship is in such terrible state. Clifford is saying that even though the ship made it, it was wrong to send it because you weren't certain enough that it would have made it safely. So you send the ship, maybe it sinks. A lot of people would say, of course, oh no, the ship shouldn't have been sent. It was full of holes and the crew needed rest and it sank. Clifford is saying, no, that would be wrong. But even if the ship made it safely, it would still have been wrong to have sent it because you had insufficient grounds to believe that it would have made it safely. Now, James kind of gives me the impression that he's okay with this when it comes to trivial matters, but not when it comes to matters of faith. Yeah, exactly. The end doesn't justify the means. Like the ship barely makes it to the harbor. It gets right to the dock and then it sinks. And luckily, there's only a few feet of water there, so it doesn't go down far. Clifford would say, what? Why did you send that ship? They all could have been killed. It doesn't matter that they made it safely. Everybody could have been killed. All of your cargo could have been lost. It was wrong to send that ship. Why? Because you didn't have evidence that it would make it safely. So those are the sorts of things that I would like to bring to bear on questions related to the paranormal. Now I'm wondering if, because James is clearly talking, he's not satisfied with Clifford. Like he says, sure, you shouldn't, maybe we shouldn't have sent the ship, but here we're talking about belief in God, which is a genuine option for James. If you've got a genuine option, it's okay to decide on faith. You can believe out of will rather than evidence. How much does this apply to the paranormal or paranormal claims, or does it at all? I would like to think about this. And I would like to come back and discuss this. Let's say, I know we've only been at this for an hour or so, but I don't think we're going to go the entire class today. But why don't we take a 10-minute break, think about it, and then we will come back and discuss whether what James has to say about the will to believe and religious faith, does this also apply in some important way or another to belief in paranormal claims and concepts? So I'll see you in 10 minutes. right. Now, so I'll just come out and say, just, bias alert. I am, when it comes at least to, let's see. Yeah, when it comes to Clifford, I've got to admit that I think what he says is pretty powerful when it comes to the kinds of claims that we have been discussing in this class. How wrong is it, though? I don't know. I mean, Clifford seems to be a bit of an absolutist about this, right? If you believe in anything at all without sufficient evidence, that is wrong. But there's something in me that also looks at both intention and effect, right? I mean, Clifford says, like, say the ship, the broken down, dilapidated ship that should never have set sail, does make it to its destination and everybody's fine and all of the cargo is safe. That was still wrong because that might not have been the case. I don't know. I don't know. I have to admit that when it comes to certain paranormal claims, I do think that on their own, they can be relatively harmless. So, somebody who believes they've had an encounter with a deceased loved one in the form of a ghost, perhaps, or visited in a dream, say, is probably a pretty innocuous belief to have. So what would be the effect there? Well, it might make you feel comforted in the face of a loss, right? Perhaps it might even help you process that loss, process those emotions. That's a possibility. So the effects there seem pretty innocuous, maybe even good for people. But then there are those other claims. For example, Peter Popoff perhaps says, I can heal you by casting out your demons and so forth. That is so harmful. Because well, according to the information we have from investigators like James Randi, Popoff was having people convinced that they were healed, and then those people would then stop taking their medication. And of course, they weren't actually being healed. So he's got people believing that they are cured of their illnesses when they're not. And not only that, because they think they're cured, they stop taking their meds, which is not really a good thing, right? Isaac says here, I know a few people that absolutely do not believe in the paranormal, who have had one experience that seems so real to them, and that they believe in it. So you mean they weren't believers and then they had an experience and then that convinced them that the paranormal is real? Is that what you're saying there? I just want to make sure I understand clearly. If so, I mean, I've heard similar stories. Oh, just that specific experience. Oh, that's really interesting. So they still don't believe in the paranormal, but they were like, no, man, I saw the UFO, or I saw that ghost, or I don't know what it was, but I saw it, like that kind of a thing. Yeah, okay. All right. That's really interesting. Yeah. Well, that's the appeal of anomalistic psychology for me, because all of us are going to have at some point in our life multiple kinds of anomalous experiences. So yeah, that's really interesting. So I have to admit, this is my way of saying that I think that Clifford has a real point. I don't know if I want to be as absolutist about it as he does, but I think he's got a pretty darn good point. But maybe we can make what Clifford says a little bit more restrictive. It's okay, if we're dealing with something that could potentially result in a harm, then we shouldn't believe without evidence. Could you argue that those innocuous beliefs will provide an impetus for others to abuse those beliefs for personal gains? I think you could argue that, absolutely. So if you don't believe the people who want to exploit others aren't able to, yeah, like maybe yeah, actually, I can kind of personally relate to this. I remember that my grandmother was really curious about the paranormal, which I thought was, whatever, fine. She would read books by, like Sylvia Browne, for example. And I was like, I don't agree with what she says, but I guess it's fine reading it. But Sylvia Browne was a predator. I mean, she would absolutely take advantage of people. I mean, she would gaslight parents with missing children. She would claim that their children were dead. In some cases, their children were not dead, and they were later found. It's just awful, the stuff that she did to people. And yeah, you're right. Having what seems like a fairly innocuous belief might open you up to being exploited in that way. So that's something to be aware of. Also, intentions matter, right? Maybe somebody who believes in ghosts or UFOs just because they think, oh, it's cool, like it's kind of neat, I like it. But yeah, cool. But there are other people who are trying to take advantage of people, right? You have your Peter Popoffs and your Sylvia Browns, and like there are predatory people out there. There are some people who genuinely believe. There's a lot of YouTube channels, for example, a lot of YouTube channels that will teach you how to tap into your psychic powers, right? And it's just a fun thing that people might do. It's like the Ouija board, right? Have a seance with your friends with a Ouija board. You'll probably have a fun time. Don't pay money to a medium, though, because they might take advantage of you. Yeah, that was from Inside Edition. That was like that's one of the first viral videos I remember on YouTube, like back when YouTube was new. That was one of the early viral videos. Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, yeah. There's if this is what you're talking about, Ben, there might be more than one example actually, but the one I'm talking about is a clip from Inside Edition where a reporter is showing a picture of a girl to a medium, say, oh, this girl was missing and blah, 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 what happened to her, and the medium's like, oh, I'm sorry, but she died. And then the investigator is like, well, actually, that girl is me. And woo, big reveal. And the medium just kind of is like, oh, shoot, I've been caught. So, yeah. So there is something, I guess this is all by way of saying, I think that Clifford has a real point. And James's point may or may not stand when it comes to religious matters. But my feeling is that when it comes to matters like paranormal claims, it might even be questionable whether believing in those phenomena are genuine options. I mean, think about it. Let's think about it. Let's come up with a paranormal claim and see if believing in the truth of that claim is a genuine option. Here, I'll just get this chat out of the way and we'll go back up here. So remember that a genuine option has to be live, it has to be forced, it has to be momentous. So the option, you've got two hypotheses, believe or don't believe. But so believe in A or don't believe in A. Both of those have to be live. Now for me, let's say we say believe in ghosts. Believe in ghosts or don't believe in ghosts. Well, one of those is just not a live hypothesis for me, right? Believe in ghosts is not a live hypothesis. Not believing in ghosts is a live hypothesis, but believe in ghosts is not a live hypothesis for me. So for me, it cannot be a genuine option. Is the choice forced? Well, let's say I wasn't certain about ghosts. Let's say it was a living option for me. Is it a forced choice? Is it avoidable? Yeah, I suppose it is. It's not like religion where, at least I don't think James would say it's like religion, where, you know, it has massive consequences for how you conduct yourself during your time on Earth. And is it momentous, like believe in ghosts or don't believe in ghosts? To me, again, not momentous. It's not like, you know, you have this one chance to decide what to do with the rest of your life. Do you want to be an atheist or a Christian? And then you decide to become a Christian and get baptized and you're welcomed into the community. And that's your life from now on, right? To me, belief in ghosts doesn't seem quite like that. But I don't know what you guys think. Yeah. I mean, then again, that's just one example. This is also kind of relative. Remember, a hypothesis that's live for one might not be live for another. So are there any other examples of paranormal claims that might be genuine options for any of you? Let's think about it. Let's think it through. Well, what kinds of claims might or might not be? What kinds of paranormal claims? Like if we take a paranormal claim, like extraterrestrial life exists. So now we can generate two hypotheses. So be a believer in extraterrestrials or not. Is that hypothesis a genuine option? Or is one of these a genuine option? Yeah, it depends how we frame the question, right? Alien life, sure, that's a living option for me. I mean, think about it. This is a really good example of a live option for me, because aliens exist. Believe in aliens. Yeah, that's plausible. It's a big universe out there. But it's also plausible that there are no aliens. Perhaps we're the first intelligent life to evolve in the cosmos. That's possible. Maybe there were aliens and they destroyed themselves, right? Look at what we're doing to the planet Earth. I mean, we have climate change, we have nuclear weapons, we have disease, war. It's not out of the question that we will snuff ourselves out of existence at some point, and that could be the case with alien life too. So there are aliens and there are not aliens. Those are both live options for me. Yeah, what are they doing with the cows? I would, you know, for the next time I teach this class, I'm really going to have to look into the origins of that. Why are the aliens messing with cows? I mean, I remember it was always kind of a thing. Even in the 90s. I had the Super Nintendo back in the day, and I used to play this game, Earthworm Jim 2. It was a run and gun platformer game where you're Jim, an earthworm, in a biomechanical suit, and you're just running around shooting everything. And there's this one level where you're trying to put cows back. It's such a silly game. You're trying to put cows back in their barns because if you don't, these flying saucers come and take them away. It's a really weird game. Like, it's a really weird, like, absurdist, surrealist kind of game. It's actually, I mean, it's kind of a shame. The creator turned out to be a bit of a horrible person, which really sucks. It's like a J.K. Rowling situation. Yeah, it's yeah, it was a shame how the creator turned out to be just basically a horrible person. But you can go and read about that if you want. My point is that is, I guess, you know, it was stuff like that in the 90s. Aliens abducting cows was a thing, and it still is, I suppose. Are aliens in Majora's Mask? I don't remember that. Was that the moon? Oh, you know, I didn't ever finish that one, so I guess I just didn't get to that part. Oh, crop circles. Oh, that's interesting. Crop circles are probably made by people. There was actually a pair in the UK who came out a few years after the crop circle phenomena really took off, and it kind of went viral before there was the internet. It was like a viral news story, kind of like the stories about Sasquatch back in the day. But there were these couple of guys who came out and said, we're the ones making the circles. And skeptics considered it settled after that. But people keep making crop circles, one assumes. I mean, at least the most plausible, the most parsimonious explanation is that they are made by people, that's pranksters. So it's a bit like the UFO hoax. I don't know if I made a video available, that Vice News video about how to fake a UFO. Even after it was revealed that it was a hoax, I'm sure some people continued to believe that they had seen an alien spacecraft. And even what was the show that there was they showed a clip from, was it UFO Hunters or something? It was one of those History Channel shows, right? With their experts saying, there's no way this is fake. It's not balloons. It can't be balloons and torches at all. But that's exactly what it was, right? Similar with crop circles. Well, so much for aliens. Are there any other examples that we can think of that might count as genuine options? I mean, I was kind of harsh on the prospect of ghosts, but I suppose for some people that could be a live option, because the existence of ghosts implies the existence of life after death. And if you want to believe in that, that may be a genuine option for you. And a consequence of believing that there is life after death, if that were the case, perhaps that makes the possibility of ghosts plausible for some people, right? But to bring it back to Clifford, I think that opens up the door for exploitation. Mediums who will claim to contact your dead relatives for a price, of course. So like more like science fiction zombies rather than zombies as originally conceived. Zombies originally are part of, I believe it's Haitian folklore. And ultimately their origins are traceable back to Africa. So enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas and obviously brought many of their folk beliefs with them. And one of those was the zombie. And that's kind of been appropriated into science fiction. Horror, originally horror, because a zombie was an undead creature. But now zombies have kind of been science fictionalized, where they're not undead in the traditional sense. Rather, they are, like The Last of Us. They're not really zombies. They're the infected, right? So they're not undead. It's a fungus. It's the cordyceps fungus. It makes them into a zombie, right? That's different. I mean, the science fiction sort of zombie is a science fiction zombie, right? Does that mean something like a Last of Us sort of situation could ever happen, where there's a cordyceps fungus that turns us all into basically zombies? I don't know. I'm not a mycologist, right? But yeah, I was going to say the science fiction zombie to me is kind of like the possibility of alien life. I don't really think of it as paranormal. But some people probably still do associate zombies with the paranormal, perhaps. Yeah. I suspect there's an answer to this question, though. I mean, because there are real parasites and fungi. Yeah, the meat rots. Yeah. Yeah. So I've what was I going to say? Well, yeah, there are real parasites, fungi, that will affect, like insects, for example. Cordyceps does this with ants. That's where they got the idea from for the video games, and then later the HBO show. It will change the behavior of the ant, making it do things to help the fungus reproduce. But of course, the ant is alive while that's happening, and then it dies. The behaviors that the fungus causes are also quite simple. I don't think that you would, again, I'm not a mycologist, but I don't think that you would get the complicated sort of behavior that you need out of these zombies from these shows and movies, right? From a fungal infection or from a virus, or something like that. But that's just my feeling. I mean, again, the reason we've sci-fied zombies is because it makes it easy to tell cool stories, right? Cool apocalyptic stories. I think that's the appeal. You can do a lot of cool stuff in a story about the end of the world. We do it with zombies in science fiction. We do it with robots and AI in science fiction too, right? So I think that's the appeal. I actually haven't played, I'm not going to lie, haven't played The Last of Us. I tried. And I just didn't, I don't know. It didn't hook me. But the television show did. So I said to myself, I've got to go back and play the video game now, for real. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry to have misled you. Oh, Jack, yeah, I know. I started and I hadn't played video games in forever, and I was like, I suck at video games now, and I just didn't. Um um I've got to give it another shot though. Yeah, I know it's good. It's good. Yeah, I know that it's good because the show was good. And I know they changed some things and they added some things um like that third episode. Man, that was good. It wasn't in the video game. But they expanded on the characters and I was like, "Wow, that was great." Oh yeah, I've been wanting to play Ragnarok. I played the first one for the PS4. I guess it's just God of War. Even though there's like a bunch of other ones from back in the day. Yeah, so I've played the direct prequel to Ragnarok. I want to play Ragnarok very badly. Right now, I'm trying to work my way through Tears of the Kingdom, actually. But I've been so busy that I've barely had a chance to play. So I've kind of given up on it for now. Um, but after classes wrap up, I'm going to be catching up on the old video games for sure. So, yeah, I think that's the appeal of those kinds of things. You can tell really great stories. Like the story, again, I mean, I hate to go harping on about it, but that third episode of Last of Us, long, long time, the one with it's it was what's his name? Nick Offerman, and then the other guy, he was the guy on season 1 of White Lotus. Um, and I was like, wow, this is insanely good storytelling. Like it was so good. Um, you can only really tell a story like that at the end of the world, right? So I guess that's the appeal. That's the appeal. Another great apocalyptic show, by the way, is Battlestar Galactica. It doesn't have zombies, but it has robots. So just putting that out there. Okay, we're getting a little off topic. Now, what are some other paranormal claims or phenomena that we could consider? Whether they might be genuine options for some people. I mean, let's hear from some believers. I mean, I know that we have people here that believe in some paranormal phenomena. So are those on your thinking? Well, you believe in them, so they must be genuine options for you. How do they fit within this? Okay, Sasquatch. Okay, so is belief in Sasquatch a genuine option? I mean, you could well, is it are both hypotheses live? So not for so okay, so there is a Sasquatch would be a dead hypothesis to you, but for some people they might really be agnostic about Sasquatches, such that um, believe in Sasquatch or disbelieve in Sasquatch are both live options for them. So we've got the first one. But is it forced? Um, Not really, but it could be momentous. Maybe you have the opportunity to go Bigfoot hunting, right? You've got this one chance to appear on a documentary television show where you go into the woods and try and find Bigfoot. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Do you go? So, maybe some of this could be treated as a maybe some of this is making this a genuine option for some people. Yeah, why not? I don't even believe in Bigfoot, um, but I think I would go because I might see something else that's really cool. Maybe I'd see a grizzly bear. I've never seen a grizzly bear. Um, Oh yeah. Okay, so maybe that's why it becomes forced. Maybe you are from a family that definitely believes in Bigfoot and you have to decide. In this house, we believe in Bigfoot, damn it, right? Yeah. Yeah, so it could be. And I guess we could imagine the case with any other paranormal claim, right? It could be, it couldn't be a genuine option. Remember, all of this is James's way of saying that if there's no evidence either way, and you want to decide, you can make that choice for faith, for religious faith. That's what James is saying. It's like, look, there's no evidence. It impacts our lives. You've got to pick. You've got to choose. It's okay to believe without evidence. This is his way of grounding faith in the will to believe. So this isn't going to work for everybody, right? I mean, for somebody like me, you know, be an agnostic or be a Christian, neither of those work for me, right? I've already decided. I am an atheist. I don't believe. And I'm kind, I guess I'm a what you'd call a weak atheist or an agnostic atheist. Like, it's like, yeah, sure, maybe God exists. I don't know, but I don't have any evidence for that. And I'm not going to live my life as if I'm not going to play Pascal's wager and be a Christian or something just in case. I'm not going to do that. So for me, it's not a genuine option to believe in God, but for some people it is. And James is trying to say that's okay. But I just can't shake Clifford's worries of things going wrong. Things going wrong here aren't sinking ships. They're people being taken advantage of. Any other thoughts before we turn to the next little thing I wanted to discuss? Well, speaking of beliefs, and I I realize that not all paranormal beliefs are like this, but I think you guys can guess where I'm going to go with this. It's got to do with misinformation. You may have heard the terms recently. You may have heard the term epistemic responsibility. Epistemic comes from epistemology, the theory of knowledge. We live in this age of misinformation, a sort of post-truth era, it's been called. I think we've been working up to something like this for a long time. It's got to do with a lot of different things, but it's sort of culminated in this. I think that the Trump presidency during the COVID-19 pandemic was like peak age of misinformation. And this again ties back to what Clifford says about harms. See, maybe, you know, maybe it's okay to believe without evidence when it comes to religious matters, but I mean, when we're in a pandemic and we've got misinformation going around, everybody has an epistemic responsibility in the sense that they need to try and make sure that what they believe and what they are telling other people is true. And I worry because a lot of beliefs a lot of paranormal beliefs are very similar to beliefs like anti-vax beliefs, for example. Often these kinds of things all share the same DNA, right? That's why I made the connection between early on in the class between what we're talking about here and conspiracy theories. there is a tendency amongst some paranormal researchers to claim that scientists are actively suppressing the truth. Scientists have the aliens, they're just not telling us, right? They have the flying saucers, they're just not telling us. They've got Bigfoot, they have his body, but they're not telling us. Why? Reasons. The problem is, this can easily get way out of hand. And it can make a big difference. It can make a big difference when we're, say, in the middle of a pandemic and we're trying to get people vaccinated against this virus, and we've got people thinking that scientists are putting microchips in people or changing their DNA or something, right? And I've said it before, you know, belief in ghosts, playing around with a Ouija board, it does seem pretty innocuous, but for me, it's the same kind of thinking that leads people to believe in these harmful conspiracy theories. And I don't want to live in that kind of world. And getting back to religion, I said I was an agnostic atheist, a weak atheist. You know, the atheist in me doesn't need God. The agnostic part is like, but you know, we're not, ultimately it's not something we could know. I guess where James says belief in God is a genuine option for him, atheism is my genuine option. Yeah, I don't know either way, but I'm taking a leap of a lack of faith, if you like, instead of a leap of faith. But I mean, on the whole, I think I'm quite happy for, you know, like, live and let live. Like, I have Christian friends, I have Muslim friends, I have agnostic friends, and that's fine. I can't be friends with somebody who believes in like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, though. I can't be friends with a religious fanatic. I just can't be friends with those people, right? It doesn't work. Because if your beliefs cause or can cause harm, I mean, that's a problem. And I don't know where the line is. I admit, I don't know where that line is. Right? Ouija boards, probably okay. Belief in alien spacecraft being hidden and studied by the US government, I mean, well, I don't know, maybe, but it's kind of a slippery slope from there to, oh, the government actually controls everything. Oh, and actually the government is controlled by the deep state or the Illuminati. Oh, but the deep state is actually just lizard people. And like, it's a slippery slope, and the slippery slope can be a fallacy, but not if the slope is actually real. And I think we have seen in real time, I've seen people who were super reasonable get radicalized simply by spending too much time in the wrong places on the internet. And that's a real worry for me. I don't know. What about you guys? Yeah, it is scary. Radicalization is scary. And I know people want to have their beliefs. Like, if you want to be religious, go to church and whatever, great. If you want to believe in ghosts, great. But yeah, but what happens when people start to become radicalized? It's like how people used to say that marijuana is a gateway drug. If people smoke marijuana, they'll do crack later, right? But we know that that's not the case. However, are there such gateways? Are there such gateway drugs? Maybe cannabis isn't a gateway drug, but alcohol might be. Um, for me, alcohol was a bit of a gateway drug because I would have a drink and then I'd want to have a cigarette with my beer when I'm out at the bar or something, right? And then all of a sudden I'm smoking cigarettes. I'm addicted to nicotine. So that, yeah, I don't know. Maybe some beliefs work like that and others don't. Yeah, I remember Gamergate. Yeah. Yeah, Gamergate was a bad one. I remember I was because that was probably right after I was just getting back into video games, and I'd be following maybe some vloggers there on YouTube talking about video games, like, oh, this game is really great, this game sucks, and game reviews, tech reviews, old I was really into the retro consoles. I even went and dug out all of my old consoles from my parents' basement and brought them to Ottawa with me. I've got my Super Nintendo, I've got my N64, I have a GameCube, I have a Wii. But I noticed when Gamergate started to become a thing, because all of a sudden everybody was getting super misogynistic, and I was like, I'm gonna have to stop watching this. This is leaving a bad taste in my mouth, Yeah, I think that Gamergate and incel culture are quite interlinked, right? I mean, and just the vitriol that you would say. I remember, like, I don't agree with everything somebody like, say, Anita Sarkeesian says. Anita Sarkeesian was a sort of prominent figure in video game critique around this time. Still is, I suppose. I absolutely do not agree with everything she says, but the vitriol she received from people just for critiquing video games was insane. And by the way, critique doesn't mean cancel, right? That's a thing that these folks will do. If a movie comes out or a video game comes out and it's like, oh, there's some problematic feature of this, often, the Gamergate crowd or people like that will go, oh, you're trying to cancel everything. You're trying to make it so that there's no more video games, and or video games will go all woke, whatever that means. It's like, no, when we critique something, we're critiquing it. We're saying what's good, what's bad, and why. And it doesn't mean you can't enjoy that media. It doesn't. You can still enjoy it. Just keep the critiques in mind, right? Yeah. And it's true, Jack. A lot of people go down that rabbit hole and they don't come out. So you're lucky that you didn't go down that rabbit hole, for sure. Yeah, exactly. I mean, people do feel a bit like, if Anita Sarkeesian says there's too much violence against women in video games, some people will take that as an attack. You're right. But it's not meant that way. What it was like, hey, there's a lot of violence in video games. Maybe we can improve the gender norms in video games or something, that's all that we're saying. We're not saying we can't go and enjoy the things we enjoy. I'll give you an example, right? Like, I'm a big Star Trek fan, and Star Trek is a kind of show, even since the original series, that has been very progressive and looking to the future and trying to build that ideal society where everyone has equality. And there are still old episodes that are a little problematic, right? I'm trying to think of one example where, even just on Star Trek: The Next Generation, there are two women two female characters. You know, you got Dr. Crusher and Counselor Troy. And their storylines are always like about girl stuff. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I thought this was the 24th century. I thought that women were equal, but every time we have a Dr. Crusher story, it's something about being a mom or being a caregiver, and not anything beyond those sorts of traditional roles, right? And I can still go back and enjoy the show, but I can enjoy it knowing like, oh, well, this is a thing I didn't see before, but now I see why it's a bit of an issue, right? That's what critique is. That's what that's for. It's not about, hey, get rid of everything that's fun. It's like, oh, well, enjoy that violent video game, but, you know, I mean, look at the violence against the female characters. Maybe it's not such a good thing. Maybe you should think about that. That's what critique is for. Yeah. So let's go. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen those, like, you know, where it's like, oh, here's this social justice warrior. Look at them. And it's just like someone reading commentary. I think I put one on just out of curiosity because I wanted to see why everybody was getting so radicalized. I put one on and it was of Jordan Peterson talking at the U of T, the clip that went viral, but it was somebody voicing over it. And this guy was this straight up one of the most misogynistic people I'd ever heard. And I was like, my God, I don't know how people can stand to listen to this. But apparently people are. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to expand this. People also sort of lack the nuance to say something like, I agree, there's no way to treat women, to both treat women as equals and not to pick, if we also, yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, lack of nuance, I agree. Like, notice that, what the heck? I think that, I think that, what do I think? I can't remember. Well, I think that, you know, many of the ways that people get radicalized, it's not just misinformation. It's also highly emotionally charged, right? These guys that radicalize people on the internet get people riled up. They make them think that they are under attack or something that they like is under attack. Oh, and also, yeah, Jack, that's a good point. Social identity issues at play. Yeah. Yeah, so the cognitive dissonance kind of kicks in. I think there are people like that. And it's one of the reasons I kind of stopped debating people on the internet. Back in the day, I used to debate people on internet forums. Yeah. I'll come back to this point from you, Ben, in a moment. You know, I sort of stopped debating with people on the internet because this was my cringe era that I was telling you about. You know, I had a YouTube channel and I would talk about religion and atheism and stuff. But it just seemed like everyone was talking past one another, and I started to see people getting radicalized. And it left a bad taste in my mouth. Radicalized towards what would eventually become the alt-right. I mean, the seeds of that were there for a while. I know that's a term we've only heard relatively recently, but the seeds were there for a while. And when I was spending a time amongst all the YouTube atheists and the religious people we were debating, I noticed that certain of them were starting to go to some dark places. And that made me a little uncomfortable. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to do something proper. And that was right around the time I ended up going to university and studying philosophy. So it just kind of was very fortunate how it worked out for me, that this kind of discussion and debate on the internet led me to pursue a post-secondary education ultimately, or it was one of the things that led me to do that. Others, it's straight up radicalized. And now some of those same people are on the internet talking about, basically being like, racist or transphobic or something, and thinking that that's grounded in science when it's not. So yeah, I guess I dodged my own bullet there. I don't think I was in danger of being radicalized myself, but I was spending time in what I think was now a pretty toxic place, right? Another problem, yeah. Starts off a debate with a reasonable point to draw people in and goes right. Who's that? Oh, Jordan Peterson? I think they're all like that. Yeah. Peterson, but also Ben Shapiro, and I would say Steven Crowder is probably the worst one, because that guy, first of all, screw that guy. And second of all, he goes to some university campus dressed as Nathan Drake or something, and goes like, I'm going to debate these undergraduates who don't know anything and don't know how to debate yet. Oh, I won. Oh, I've owned the libs. And it's like, oh my God, pick on someone your own size. Like, come and talk to me, Steven Crowder. Like, I would mop the floor with you. And so would any other professor or instructor worth their salt. But he doesn't talk to them. He talks to people that are not completely educated yet. Yeah, exactly. That's the appeal. They make themselves look intelligent, having a legitimate debate. Yeah, exactly. Tabitha, you're right. He talks to people who are not prepared. And yeah, like you said, these videos are edited. They're edited to make somebody look better than someone else. I have a PhD. It would probably take me a sec to name 10 books I have read. Like, what? Do you want fiction or nonfiction? Right? I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I could either. The problem is I don't read very much for during my leisure time. Usually when I'm reading, it's because I'm preparing a class. Yeah, I've never been big on reading fiction. Never. Even when I was a kid. Other kids, they'd be reading novels. I'd be reading science books. I was always a little scientist, I guess. Yeah. Tell me about yourself. I don't know my name. Yeah, I have those moments. I think it's just, I don't know. I'm socially awkward. And I find I have to really, I don't know, when I'm talking to people like in a social setting, not like in a lecture. And a lecture is easy because I'm dumping all this information on people. But when I'm in a social situation, I have to work harder. And then sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, what is something interesting about me? Oh, I don't know. I can't really, I don't know, just pick the last thing I did for fun and tell them that, right? Like, I don't know. I do stuff like that. For $1 name, is that one? Name a woman. Name 10 famous people. Yeah. Yeah, when you're put on the spot, yeah, it's tough. Um, so as I was saying, I think when it comes to radicalization, oh, the chat's blowing up today. Oh, yeah, share, yeah, definitely share that. Um, I think that radicalization plays on people's fears. You definitely, when people are being radicalized, you can see that there's an emotional charge there. And people like Peterson and oh, I've dropped my phone. Oh, excuse me, everyone. People like your Jordan Petersons and your Ben Shapiro's. To me, here's why I don't think I got sucked down that rabbit hole. First of all, I was older than a lot of you, and that's another dangerous thing. These guys are going for an audience of young men and some women, but primarily young, uncertain men, right? So when Jordan Peterson comes along, I have some life experience under my belt. I've got a bullshit detector, a pretty good one, but not everyone does. So a lot of young guys kind of get drawn in because he sounds reasonable at first. But by the time he starts talking nonsense, you've been there so long, you don't recognize the reasonable stuff from the nonsensical stuff. But also the emotionality. I mean, Peterson, Shapiro, Crowder, all of them, they just do not seem like happy people. Have you ever noticed that? Like when you watch Jordan Peterson, does he look happy? I think he looks miserable myself. I mean, think about it. Not that I'm saying go watch Jordan Peterson. Don't. A better use of your time would be banging your head against the wall. But if you've happened to see a Jordan Peterson clip somewhere, yeah, the dude is never happy. And he's going to tell me how to live a good life? I don't think so. Yeah. Yeah, soulless is a good way to put it. I think perhaps before he became, I think to a certain extent, becoming internet famous just ruined him. Um, but at the same time, and here's the kind of a point that I want to make. At the same time, it's not as if he was himself immune to nonsense before he was internet famous. I mean, the guy is a Jungian psychologist. So I think it radicalized him completely, Jack. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it completely sent him off the deep end. I mean, just if you look at some of his early interviews on the agenda, he sounds pretty reasonable. He's debating the when he was debating some of the early issues surrounding transgender rights in Canada, for example, he would be on a panel with like another cis man, a trans man, and a trans woman. I believe we're all on the same panel. And he's having a reasonable conversation with them. He's not misgendering anyone. He's being respectful. Fast forward till now. And the guy is hanging out with Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and these guys who were like pretty hateful. And Peterson himself seems to have given into the hate. He's literally gone to the dark side. He's given into anger and hate. He is literally gone to the dark side, guys. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is, Jack. That's a really good point. Like, it goes both ways. Like Isaac says, yeah, yeah, me too. I've got this one guy. I guess he's a friend of a friend, probably former friend of a friend at this point. But everything is just, oh, Jordan Peterson, Jordan Peterson, Jordan Peterson. And I'm like, you know that there are other people, though, right? There are like other academics that write books and stuff. Like, if you're getting all your information from a single source, I mean, that's what religious fanatics do. So, yeah. I'm just worried. I worry about radicalization because, I mean, it has an impact on everyone. Oh, I think so. I saw a tweet about this. It was written, a student had asked their professor. I don't know any of the names. It's just important, you know, this is not my example. I'm not trying to plagiarize anybody here. But a student asks their professor, why, like, what's happening to Jordan Peterson? And the guy's like, well, normally in academics, um, you know, we get a dopamine rush when we present our ideas. You know, when we prepare a class and deliver a class, it's a lot of work, but we feel good when we've done it. When we submit a publication, sometimes that process takes years. I remember my first real publication was a book chapter. This is my own thing now, not the other example. It was a book chapter. It took 2 years to get it done. 2 years for a book chapter, from conference presentation to final in the book, actual chapter. So it takes a long time, and you get that dopamine rush. You get that, I've accomplished something. I've contributed to knowledge. Social media, like it does with everybody else, makes that instant gratification, right? So now Jordan Peterson doesn't have to spend years working on a book. Now Jordan Peterson can tweet something or make a video on Patreon and get instant gratification and also lots of money. And that is definitely an incentive for radicalization. It's something that I try to be very, very careful of, because I do have an online presence, and I try and keep it small for a reason, right? I don't know. It's like the One Ring. I cannot wield that kind of power, right? So I'm trying to be like Gandalf. Don't tempt me, Frodo. I don't want that ring. Yeah. Some of these make other academics seem, yeah, I think so. They give academics a bad name for sure. Yeah, these are good points. And notice how they play on other people's ignorance, right? Like the basic biology arguments play on people's ignorance of a topic that, I mean, frankly, research is burgeoning. You know, research when it comes to gender and sexuality is really burgeoning right now. There's a lot. If you take a gender studies class, there's a lot that you'll learn that you just won't learn out in the world. If you take certain biology classes, you'll learn the same thing, right? But these people play on people's ignorance, play on their folk notions, right? They want people not to think too deeply about this, right? And that's why I think they're doing so much with gender, partially because it's an area where we're learning a lot of interesting stuff about gender and sex and the difference between the two and how gender identity works. I mean, something that's really exciting for me is learning about the neurological basis of gender identity and gender expression. Because those people that are all like, oh, biology, like there's boys and girls because biology. Sorry, but the brain body interface is a biological thing. And what the science seems to show us is that it's perfectly possible for gender identity to be sort of decoupled from physiology. Do you know what I mean? By virtue of the workings of the brain. And understanding that would be, in part, understanding a biological phenomenon or process, right? But oh yeah, it's all straw man. It's all straw man. Yeah. So I think, these people don't, when they say, oh, biology, they don't actually care about the science. What it is a power move, right? And that's another thing we've got to remember, is that there are people in this world who want to be able to say what other people can and can't do, even whether people can exist or not. So that's another reason why you have to exercise epistemic responsibility. You might inadvertently become a cog in a machine that's like a hate machine. And you might get so radicalized that you don't see it and you never find your way out. This is how the Nazis managed to do what they did. The Nazi leadership, Hitler, Goering, Goebbels, Himmler, straight up evil, no question, straight up evil. But the regular Joe who goes and joins the SS because he wants to make his family proud, was he evil? Eventually, I imagine he becomes evil. But did he start out that way? Not really. Was just a regular guy. I think a really good example of this is I was actually in a few months ago. Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people, released a video talking that was directed at people who are living in Russia right now. Well, it wasn't exactly that. It wasn't exactly that. I mean, Germany had an army. Like, Germany had the Wehrmacht. That was their army. And it was the same army they had the whole time. The SS, that was the Schutzstaffel. That stands for Protection Squad. It was a paramilitary organization, and they only accepted the best. And the best to them meant you got to be 6'2", blonde hair, blue-eyed, handsome. You had to be Aryan, air quote. I use air quotes because there aren't really Aryans. Okay. Now, somebody might join up thinking, look at me, Ma, I've made it. I'm important. I'm doing something good for Germany. It's great. Then you wind up working at a concentration camp, just systematically murdering people. Do you know why I know that a lot of these people weren't evil to start out with? The reason they started using the gas chambers was because the folks in the SS that were executing people, they couldn't do it anymore with guns. Like, it was giving everybody PTSD. So they had to use technology to make the systematic murder of millions of people easier. That was the leadership that did that. The cogs in the machine, though, by that point were radicalized, turned to the dark side, turned to evil. And there was no, there's a point of no return, I think, with radicalization. I even had a friend when I was an undergraduate. He served in Afghanistan as a paramedic with the Canadian Forces. And he retired because he got an injury over there. Came back with a broken leg, really bad broken leg. He's fine now. But so he's retired, and if you've served in the forces, you can go to university, and that's how we met. Free university because he was a veteran and studied philosophy. And he said at one point, he's like, man, if I had been in 1930s Germany, I could easily have been radicalized. So yeah, I guess we all have an epistemic responsibility, because there are evil people who will use us for evil ends if we don't watch out for that, right? But that's the point. Yeah, the German army was just an army. The SS was a paramilitary organization, and people weren't pressed into service. People joined up voluntarily. Now there was another point there. I think it's gone. By the way, just while we're on the topic of Nazis, if you're still on the fence about the gender stuff, the gender debate happening, just remember that the first thing the Nazis did, the first book burning they did, was the book burning at the Institute of Sexual Sciences, which was at the time the leading institution in the world on sexual sciences. This is where people went to medically transition in the 1930s. A lot of people didn't even know this was possible back then. It was, until the Nazis came to power. They literally set the clock back on that by I don't know how many years, but they literally held back the progress of the human race. So yeah, I worry, is it a slippery slope between believing in patent nonsense and that kind of evil? Maybe. It depends. It sounds like you all have pretty good heads on your shoulders, though. A few of you in the chat have said, "Oh, I almost got radicalized, but I didn't," and it's really good that you didn't. It shows that you all have good heads on your shoulders, right? So I don't know. Any other thoughts before we wrap up for today? I've kind of run out of things to say. I know we've gone quite far afield of James and Clifford, but that's okay. Everybody's pretty quiet now. Yeah, no problem. It's the end of the class. Yeah, I guess you're right, Tabitha. Yeah, we're talking, is it okay to believe things without evidence? I mean, it's not just without evidence. You've got to ask whether the evidence is good. And a lot of the evidence that people who attempt to radicalize other people present is not good. And I think that was the point with the the biology arguments. The biology arguments like that the anti-trans people make, they're not good arguments, right? I mean, biology is complicated. And I'm no biologist, but I know that if you were to ask a biologist, they would say it's complicated, right? Yeah, well, this is something that I think philosophers assume, that we're all just super rational and coherent. I was talking about this in my other class, actually, like when we there's a thinker named Donald Davidson who says that when we attribute mental states to other people, we do so using a principle where the beliefs we attribute are as rational and coherent as possible. But of course, people aren't actually that reasonable. And that's something that I've learned, is that I think you should aim for rationality and coherence within your own belief system. But don't assume that other people are operating the same way. because there are definitely people who are not rational and whose beliefs are not coherent with one another. Just engage in a Socratic dialogue with an anti-vaxxer or an anti-trans person, and you will find that their beliefs actually don't make that much sense. You know, it's like the meme. There's a lot of memes like this where the conspiracy theorist is like, I question everything, and then even your conspiracy theories, no, not those. Like well, that's not very coherent and consistent if you're supposed to be questioning everything. Or the anti-trans people with the biology stuff, and I'm like, well, hang on. If somebody's like medically transitioning and they're on like hormone replacement therapy, the hormones cause changes in the body. I mean, that's a pretty biological process. So like, and then what do? They move the goalposts and they say, oh, I don't mean biology in the strict sense. I mean, I don't know, chromosomes. And then it's like, well, hang on, there are chromosomal variations in humans. So much so that these kinds of like intersex sort of variations occur at about the same rate as redheadedness does. So it's not really all that rare. So that's also a legitimate way of being a human being, grounded in biology. So yeah, no, just if you press them on your beliefs, you'll find that they're not rational nor coherent. But the problem is what they play on is people's ignorance and people's fears. And some people pushing paranormal claims do the same thing. So you need to, in your baloney detection kit, you need to include something like that, an awareness of when somebody might be trying to convince you of something that's false, perhaps to serve some other end, by playing on your ignorance and your fears. It's okay if you want to believe in something, I think, without evidence, as long as the person that's trying to convince you of that isn't trying to radicalize you or trying to get you to cause harm to someone else. Where that line is going to be different for everyone, I suppose. Key bono, which is funny because who benefits from the information someone is trying to give to you? You're absolutely right. Like if someone starts up a conversation, I'm sorry to use the gender example over and over, it's just very much within the zeitgeist right now. And I think it's important that people know. I mean, people on the right wing are acting like the existence of transgender people is the end of the world. And I'm like, dude, like 1% of people are transgender. And also, can we just like all just exist and, be happy? Like really, I don't get it. I don't understand the hate. I really don't understand the hate. But yeah, if someone's trying to be like, oh, biology, two genders, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but where are you really going with this? Are you trying to just arm me with some knowledge? No, you're not. You're trying to make me subscribe to an ideology that hurts people, right? And I'm not going to do that. So I guess that's where the line is for me. I couldn't even be religious. Like, I know that you can be religious and be good. I know that that's the point of religion, to be a good person and live a good life and maybe get into the afterlife. I get it. I can't be a religious person. I just can't, because I've seen it do too much harm. And I'm not saying it's harmful for you necessarily. And I'm not trying to convince, if you're Christian, great. If you're a Muslim, awesome. If you're Jewish, awesome. If you're Buddhist, a Hindu, great. I'm not trying to be Richard Dawkins here. But for me, I don't know. I think those things are literally unbelievable, right? They're not live options for me. Yeah. So always remember, everybody, as you go forward in life, when someone tries to convince you of something, exercise that epistemic responsibility. Critically examine their claims. This is why we've been critically examining things in this class. Critique does not mean dismiss. Critique means we look at it, we evaluate it, we look at the strengths, the weaknesses, the evidence for and against, and we make a decision. What do we do with this? That's what critiquing is. So this class is not supposed to be the paranormal doesn't exist. Sure, I don't believe it exists. But what I'm actually trying to do, what I've been trying to do this whole time, is arm you with the skills to critically evaluate paranormal claims as well as other claims. I hope I've succeeded in that a little bit. But it sounds like, as I said, all of you have pretty good brains in your heads already. And you already are very good at thinking critically. And that's just wonderful to see. Now, I don't really have anything else for today, other than to say that the quiz is now open. So instead of the final reading response, you have a quiz. I will slightly lower the weight of that quiz. And I think I'll redistribute that weight onto your proposals and your final papers. That's just because I can't have a quiz worth 20% during the final week. So I have to make it slightly less, but it won't be a big difference. It's open book, but do study ahead of time because there's a time limit. You have 45 minutes once you begin, and you can begin anytime from now until Friday. Once you begin, there's 45 minutes. If you have academic accommodations such that you require extra time, those are all in place. And by the end of the week, I want to have the feedback for your essay topic proposals returned to all of you. That way, you can get right to work on your papers, on your final papers. So that's all for today. I think the final class will be just a brief wrap up sort of thing. Just a sort of final discussion. Oh, excuse me. Final discussion. Just any questions you have about anything, really. It'll be kind of like a big, long set of office hours, I suppose. So thanks, everybody, for being here today. Are there any questions before we conclude? All right, no problem. All right, everybody's good to go. Thanks to all of you. This was a good class. I like how the seminars are open-ended and we get a lot of discussion in. It's really good. All right, thanks, everyone. I'll see you all on Thursday. Bye for now.